Hey, this is Mike from the Run Testers, and this is our first run review of the Polar Ignite 3. Here's your lowdown on the key running details on the Polar Ignite 3. The Ignite 3 is priced at £289 in the UK and $329.95 in the US, making it a sizable jump up in price from the Ignite 2. Polar sticks to a 43mm case with a single physical button and now swaps a 1.2-inch TFT display for a slightly larger 1.28-inch AMOLED screen with Gorilla Glass 3.0, making it the first Polar to include an AMOLED display. This is why it offers largely the same multi-sports tracking modes with outdoor running and treadmill running covered, offering training suggestions, training at race pace, an interval timer and a new back to start navigation feature. This is also the first Polar to include a dual frequency GPS mode, joining the likes of Apple, Huawei, Chorus and Amazfit in promising improved tracking accuracy near tall buildings and even in bad weather. Other new features include a voice guidance mode to offer vocal feedback on progress during runs. Polar's FuelWise fueling recommendations and sleep tracking now gets new sleep features like SleepGate, which is designed to offer advice on the optimal time to go to sleep. Battery life is up to 5 days in smartwatch mode with 30 hours of GPS battery life and 100 hours in Polar's power saving mode. Okay, so let's get into design and what the Ignite 3 is like to wear. Now, I have tested the Ignite 2. I think, with the Ignite 2, it's definitely a step into a more kind of lifestyle, fashion-focused design. Polar calls this a fitness watch. It wants it to feel a little bit more accessible to people who aren't just running or doing triathlons, but it does have a lot of those features that allow you to track those activities. Now, in terms of what you're getting on the Ignite 3 compared to the Ignite 2, the first thing obviously is that screen. I will talk about a few other things before I get into the screen though. The first thing being is that you are still only getting a solitary physical button. It's been slightly moved position-wise. It now sits more centrally on the case, which I think it's fine. I didn't have a massive issue in terms of where it was sat on the Ignite 2. What I have more of an issue with is I feel that maybe it needs an extra physical button on here. I think the main example I can give is that when I've used it to kind of track runs, now if you're not using it with the always on display enabled, the raise to wake gesture support is not great. So ultimately what I found, particularly in my indoor runs, is that if I wanted to wake up the screen reliably, I've had to press a button. Now when you do press the button, you can accidentally pause the workout. So for me, I feel like it needs another button on this watch just to make it a nicer watch to use and to interact, and just make it a little bit more intuitive to use in general. That's the thing I would say. The other thing is that Polar has changed the strap that you got on the Ignite 2 that you now get on the Ignite 3. So you now got a strap which I've seen other brands use. So Fitbit have done something similar. I would say Samsung have as well, where the strap kind of sits underneath against your skin, which I think ultimately is done to get a more reliable fit, to ensure those sensors sit a little bit closer to your wrist as well, to kind of improve the accuracy. Ultimately though, it's not very comfortable and it's a bit awkward to get on and take off. And there was one point where when I was out on my run, I took the watch off to take a few pictures and do a bit of video. I tried to put it on. It was a cold day and I was struggling to put that strap underneath the other part of the strap. So for me, I don't know why Polar has changed the strap from the Ignite 2 on the Ignite 3, because I think the one on the Ignite 2 was absolutely fine. It didn't need to be changed. And for some reason, Polar's decided to change it here, which, as I said, I don't think they needed to do. Now, into the big thing, which is the AMOLED display. Now, this is the first Polar to have an AMOLED display, which is a great thing, and I'm glad that Polar has finally done that on one of its watches. It does feel like it makes sense on the Ignite because it's, as I said, it's kind of targeted, I think, at the kind of fitness kind of tracking and fitness watch crowd. Less so the kind of running focused crowd, but obviously it does have those running features there. Now, in terms of it being, in terms of what it's like to use and how the quality of the AMOLED screen, I would say it's very, very good. I think it's up there with the kind of best kind of AMOLEDs I've seen on a sports watch, on a lot of smartwatches as well. So, hats off to Polar from that point of view. I think it's a high quality, vibrant, colourful screen. You do get some bezel, a little bit like you did on the Polar Ignite 2, but I definitely think it's better hidden. On the Ignite 2, there's a little bit more bezel at the bottom of the screen. Now it's a bit more equal in terms of that bezel, and with the right watch faces, it's kind of well disguised from that point of view. As I said, you do have a always on display mode here, so if you want to keep the screen on 24/7, it will show the time when you're not kind of tracking. That does hammer the battery life, which I'll get into later. Other things to kind of talk about as well, it's kind of got Gorilla Glass 3.0 to offer a bit more durability. Though what I will say is I already have a scratch on this screen, and that's with kind of less than a couple of weeks of kind of training with this and finally being able to go out and do some running. So that is not good. Ultimately, you're getting the same level of waterproofing if you want to kind of go swimming with it. It's the same as the Ignite 2. I think the AMOLED screen is lovely. I think ultimately you're getting, I think it's a positive thing that Polar have introduced an AMOLED on its watches. Performance wise, there are some issues. Polar has sought to improve the kind of laggy kind of interactions that you've got with the Polar Ignite 2 and definitely kind of hampered a little bit of the experience of using it. I don't think it's improved personally. It said it's kind of beefed up the kind of processor power. It says that it has kind of tweaked the interface to make it better suited to the Ignite as well. It's still laggy for me, and it's pretty laggy in the sense that it's quite frustrating to use in general day to day. Polar has added rolled out a software update to address those issues. I don't think they've massively been improved based on my time since I've used it after that update. So I think from a design point of view, there's some wins and losses here. I think great. There's an AMOLED display. It's a lovely AMOLED display. You don't really notice that kind of hint of bezel that you do get on this screen still. I like the curved nature of it. It's bright, vibrant. It's already got a scratch on it. Other things, I think there should be more physical buttons on this watch as well. And I don't know why Polar changed the strap, because there was nothing wrong with the one on the Ignite 2. And I don't think this has improved things in terms of the comfort and the fit side of things. So definitely some positives and negatives on the design point of view. Now I'm going to get into the run test and let's see how the kind of new features on the Polar Ignite 3 perform. Okay, so into that run test, and I've actually done a fair few runs in this. I've had to do a lot of indoor runs with this purely because the weather has been horrendous. I've finally been able to get outside where the kind of snow subsided a little bit and it's not been too icy to run out. And really, so I could go out and test that dual frequency GPS mode that you do have on this watch. And it's the first Polar watch to offer that support, which we're kind of seeing in other watches from Amazfit, Huawei, Coros, Apple. So it's not a new feature to running watches in general, but it is to Polar. Now in general, in terms of what I found in that kind of outdoor run, is that comparing it to the Garmin Epix 2 in its multi-band mode, I found the basic data in terms of kind of distance tracking, kind of average pace, things like that, things that I would kind of look at, were generally in line in terms of what I saw. Now, when you're digging deeper into those GPS tracks, there's definitely a disparity in terms of the accuracy of those tracks. And a lot, there's sections where I've kind of ultimately been going through buildings on my routes when you compare the Polar Ignite 3 data to the Garmin Epix 2. Now, I've taken it to an area near me where I know there's a lot of tall buildings which ultimately can affect that kind of satellite pickup, can cause that kind of extra interference that you would get when you've got a kind of open, more clear area to run in. And you can kind of see from the data and the kind of screens that I've got that you do see some issues with both watches, I would say, but ultimately it's a lot worse on the Polar Ignite 3. So if I had to weigh it up in terms of the other kind of dual frequency GPS modes, I don't think it quite matches up with what I've seen with Apple. I would also say probably in terms of what I've seen in the Amazfit as well, those have been the two kind of standout ones, along with kind of Garmin's multi-band mode as well, in terms of what I've seen with watches that support those features. Now, in terms of other things, heart rate monitoring performance, it's a similar sensor to what we've seen in other Polar watches this year. I would say performance-wise, it's felt very similar to what I've seen. I think, you can have some kind of rogue bits of data though. I think, even on steady pace workouts where I've kind of seen the average heart rate being very, very high and the maximum heart rate being higher than a Garmin HRM Pro Plus chest strap as well. Sometimes it's been absolutely fine, a little bit closer with that data, but there has been some weird kind of wild bits of data that I wasn't expecting to see on very easy runs, I would say, as well. You can pair it to an external heart rate monitor, which you could do on the Polar Ignite 2 as well. So that is, I would say, if you're gonna, like a lot of watches, if you're gonna rely on those kind of heart rate based metrics, then I would pair it up with a heart rate chest strap. Basically, based on what I've seen so far, it feels like a similar story to the Ignite 2. Those are kind of my initial thoughts from a run testing point of view so far. I am going to get into a little bit about the battery life, which I think there's definitely a bit to talk about there too. Okay, so some general thoughts on battery life, and ultimately you are getting similar to what we got on the Polar Ignite 2. So the Ignite 3 offers up to 5 days in kind of general kind of smartwatch mode. So, when you're viewing notifications, using the activity tracking outside of using that GPS. That is the same as the Ignite 2. Now, in terms of GPS battery life performance, there is a bit of a step up. You're getting 30 hours compared to 20 hours on the Polar Ignite 2. Now, I would say that 30 hours probably, for me, based on my testing, represents using it not in that kind of dual frequency mode. Now, based on my testing, when I did about an hour of running, I saw a drop off of about 5%. So that would work out to probably about 20 hours for me. So not quite the 30 hours. And obviously using that dual frequency GPS does impact on the battery life, which is what we've seen on other watches that support it as well. So I think in terms of that battery life, I think you can get up to 5 days just without the tracking. I have seen kind of 20% drop off in general, 18 to 20% drop off daily in terms of my usage so far. What I will add is when you are using this watch with the always on display mode enabled, the battery does drop off dramatically. I was seeing just over a day in comparison to the 5 days without it. So if you are going to use the always on display, based on my initial testing, it's about just over a day, and you can see the battery draining very quickly. Even when I look down after 5-10 minutes, you can see it knocking off. So, the sacrifices that you make of having that AMOLED display on always is that it's going to hog the battery life, and it hogs the battery life in a very undesirable way. So I would say it's roughly the same 5 days as the Ignite 2. You are getting a little bit more in terms of GPS battery life compared to the Ignite 2 as well. 20 to 30 hours, I'd say, depending on which level of accuracy you're using that GPS in. And then if you use that always on display, for me, it's just over a day, which is not fantastic. And you can see that drain very quickly during the day. So, verdict on the Polar Ignite 3 as an option for runners. I would say my time so far has been pretty frustrating. Frustrating because I think on paper, Polar has a very nice watch here. A watch that can better rival the Garmin Venu series. So, offering you something that has those kind of strong running and sports tracking features with an AMOLED display and make it feel a little bit more like a smartwatch. Now, I say on paper because there are definitely some issues I'm already seeing with this watch which are concerning me. The first thing would be the performance of the software. Now, I think the software is better optimized to this screen, but the performance in terms of the lag, in terms of the reaction and responsiveness of the physical button to that software, it's pretty bad. And I know that Polar hasn't addressed or issued a software update to look at those things. I've updated it with that software. I'm still seeing the same issues. So that is definitely something that in my time has made it quite a frustrating watch to use. Now, yes, you are getting a very nice AMOLED display, and that is great. That is the positive. The negative is that I'm already seeing, or I've already got a scratch on that screen. From a durability point of view, there's definitely some question marks here. I definitely think there's also some question marks in terms of the features that Polar decided to offer on this watch. Now, the fact it is the first Polar watch to offer that kind of dual frequency GPS, which hopefully will make it into other Polar watches next year. Its application, I don't think is as good as some of the other dual frequency GPS modes that I've used on other watches. Things like fuel wise, I'm not sure that needs to be on this watch. I don't think it makes massive sense. And then you've got the price jump. The Polar Ignite 2 was £200. This has gone up beyond that price. And ultimately, if it sat at that price still and had all these features and the AMOLED, then potentially you've got a really compelling watch there. But if you look at things like the Venu 2, it is now cheaper than this. And I think in terms of the sports tracking, the level of battery life you're getting, general performance and the software, and just feeling a little bit slicker to use, then for me right now I would go for the Garmin Venu 2 over the Polar Ignite 3. Unless Polar can address some of these issues, then it's hard to recommend it, because I think there are some good things here, but those are ultimately outweighed by some pretty big issues as well. So for me right now, my kind of stance on it is that this is a tough one to recommend for runners, I think, because potentially, although you've got all those kind of software features, the issues that I'm having with the software performance, the issue I've got with the screen already, and that kind of crippling battery life and always on display mode as well, makes it a challenging one to say, what, this is a watch you need to go and get, which is a shame, because I think Polar was making good progress with the Ignite 2. This feels like a nice step up in terms of what you're getting with the Ignite 3, but there are still issues here, and the issues that Polar definitely need to address it. So for me, I would say, initial verdict, the Polar Ignite 3 on paper looks great. For me, in practice so far, it's not quite there yet. Okay, so there you have it. Those are our initial thoughts on the Polar Ignite 3 from a running perspective. Now, if you've got any questions about this watch, let us know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe. Hit that little bell to find out about our latest videos. And yeah, we'll see you for the next Run Testers video.